I'm joined today by Judah Fried. He is a seasoned media and political journalist. He's also the award-winning author of The Dawn of Global Sense: Awakening to the Rising Global Consciousness Now Changing Our Lives. Globalsense.com is the website. I'm very interested in this topic because so much now in popular culture, anytime you hear any discussion of a global sensibility, global or borderless considerations and explorations, very quickly there's a contingent of American political observers that jump to conspiracy theories about one world governments and kind of broader plots to control everybody with one government. That couldn't be further from what you're talking about when you talk about this global sense, could it?
I think we are not yet mature enough to be able to even attempt trying to form a global democracy without perverting it into a global tyranny. I would love to see us get to that level of enlightenment where we could actually cooperate, have a network of democracies. But at this point, I don't think we can do it. I'd love to see us instead try what I call a direct republic, in which the citizens get the final vote instead of some king or dictator or president having the final say.
Yeah, so that's something that I've talked about quite a bit, which is we have a system which on paper, in the US anyway, this political system where you have individuals who are allowed to go and they vote, and presumably their representatives are representing their actual views when they make their votes in Congress or in the Senate, wherever the case may be. But the system has really been perverted, I think, in great part because of the influence of money within politics. But is there something systemic that goes above and beyond the money issue that makes it simply not an effective system?
I think the difficulty with representative democracy, and Ben Franklin himself observed this, is that it's prone to corruption. As soon as you separate the electors from the decision making, you tend to have private interest form, which then can produce results that are not really what the citizens themselves really wanted. The key, I think, is to move as closer to direct democracy as we can get, and still in a practical way. That's why I think the idea of a direct republic could open the door, because first of all, if the citizens themselves have the opportunity to approve what the legislators do, then a lot of the crazy laws that we get would no longer get into effect. The corruption that now happens, the voters just say, "Hey, that's a corrupt law. I'm not going to vote for it," and it won't get in. The earmarks would disappear. Um, the crazy black box projects would disappear.
Although the
Certainly.
problem with that, you could make the case that for all the things you mentioned that would be positive effects of such a system, we talk a lot about the idea that we don't want to put basic civil rights to a vote. And this has come up a lot when in the context of marriage equality. And there are parts of this country where if you break it down by state or even by region, where if it were put to a vote, what now appears to be the obvious and correct path that will eventually win, which is that of full marriage equality, it would be voted down. So is there any way to have the positive aspects you mentioned without letting people vote down basic rights?
Yeah, I wonder if that's really statistically true that it would be voted down. I think
Well, it happened in California with Proposition 8, right? And now we had multiple court battles and appeals. The tide seems to be changing in California, but even still, it literally happened in California.
well, it happened in Colorado too. Back some years ago, there was Proposition 2, for example. The tricky thing is, I suppose that if you have a constitution that really honestly guarantees those rights, then I think you can have a corrupt legislature with misguided thinking, voting stuff through, and a corrupt governor or president voting, signing stuff just as easily as you can have misguided citizens. I don't really think that's a protection. I think what's really protection is people getting globally enlightened. That is, seeing that we are interconnected, that what you do to me, you're doing to yourself. What I do to you, I'm doing to myself. That everything we think, feel, say, and do has an impact. Because if we know that we are powerfully interconnected, then I think that's going to provide the self-restraint we need to really make more responsible decisions. As long as we are rooted in this, what I call split perception, or even worse, what I call authority addiction, that says that we need strong men to rule us, and that that we think that we're separated and isolated, then those kinds of aberrations can happen.
That's
If we
good because
really,
that's actually a good place to kind of jump off and refocus, because when we talk about this kind of global sensibility and the realization that as much as we would like to imagine that these lines that are imaginary that we've drawn between countries really separate the effects and consequences of decisions that are made, we're finding out increasingly that when it comes to the effects of industrialization and the use of carbon and fossil fuels, and really even when it comes to foreign policy and other decisions, those lines are really not stopping anything. In other words, the lines are in our minds, are they not?
I think so. And a lot of the mind map that we carry around is inaccurate. There's a certain level of insanity that goes on. I mean, for example, we think that we can act without consequences. We think that we can pollute and destroy the planet without there being consequences. We think I mean, here on Kauai, where I live right now, we've got a big fight going on with the genetically modified seed companies that are basically testing pesticides on the excuse of calling themselves farmers. And they're doing these open air spraying, and a lot of people are getting sick, and there's tremendous anecdotal evidence of that. And so right now there's a move here to get a bill passed through the county council that would require disclosure. And at one point, these representatives of the GMO companies sat in the county council chamber, and one of the sponsors of the bill was asking them direct questions about what they are spraying, and they sat there silently for the most part. And so if they're not willing to disclose when they're given a volunteer opportunity, therefore we're asking for the legal right to force them to disclose so that we know what we're being exposed to. But there's a certain thing. I mean, at what point does one person's right to make a profit violate with another person's to live a life?
Well,
Another
this really
person's right
brings
to
up
live a
these
life.
questions of the kind of standard political labels that you've written about in terms of libertarianism and its concern with liberty and freedom, for example. And we could talk about labels like liberal or conservative for the sake of discussing libertarianism and liberty. If you consider liberty in the global sense, it's different than if you simply consider it in terms of the United States, is it not? Because we have to consider the liberty of those beyond just our borders. And I think that that's a concept that for a lot of people is very difficult. It's sometimes because of, quote, patriotism or patriot type beliefs, but sometimes because it's just simply overwhelming to think of the world community.
Your beautiful question, and it's got multiple layers to it. There's that old saw that my freedom to swing my hand ends at your nose, which is
Right.
yeah, that's a hard way to look at it. But I think a lot of the things that have been called libertarian today are perversion of original libertarian ideas, going back to people like Karl Hess. And I think it's one thing to be able to say that there ought to be very little government, and there ought to be a maximum of liberty for the individual. What's happened is the libertarian movement has been co-opted by the objectivist movement of Ayn Rand, which was really taking selfish narcissism and extolling it as a virtue. And I think there's a big difference between the self-reliance libertarians, which I would call myself among those, versus what I call the libertine libertarians that just want freedom without responsibility or accountability. And that, I think, is destructive. That's the kind of thinking, that kind of libertarian objectivist thinking is what produced the financial meltdown in 2008, because those policies were what guided the monetary policy of this country and produced a worldwide economic collapse. And it's, those same policies have really not been reversed, and we're still facing a similar threat. So I would like to see genuine libertarian values come into play, or even progressive libertarian values, if you will. But again, these labels aren't really the point. The point is that we have to realize that we're all interconnected. And then we're naturally going to see what is the sensible thing to do? What choice makes global sense and what choice does not make global sense? It's almost like Kant's categorical imperative. If everybody does it, does it make sense?
We've been speaking with Judah Fried. The book, which I recommend, is called The Dawn of Global Sense, Awakening to the Rising Global Consciousness Now Changing Our Lives. I wish we had more time. It's really a pleasure to speak with you today from Hawaii, which is very cool.
I'm really grateful. And today is, by the way, the debut of the book. And so people go to globalsense.com and get links to being able to buy the book if someone is so interested. My hope is that it'll go viral and help change the way we're thinking and behaving in the world, because we need to wake up fundamentally.